So we're continuing with our story time, and today's story is about Krishnacharya. And the theme of the story is we can be extraordinary. So in this story, we continue with the teacher and the student, but this time the student has to make a long journey to see his teacher, and he is a little put out by that fact. So let's begin. It was a long and winding journey through the high mountain passes, and he'd been on this bus all day long. He had endured the smells of sick stomach mixed with exhaust fumes, the sounds of squawking chickens and raucous children and bleating goats. And this was all for the pleasure of his teacher's company. And now, here he was, waiting at a crossroads in the middle of nowhere. Why had she decided to retreat to this lonely, desolate landscape? This was a mystery to him. He contemplated the frustrating puzzle of his teacher, thinking she should really understand that she needed to live closer to those who needed her. Eyeing the uncomfortable windswept landscape in the chill evening air, half wondering, is somebody going to be coming to pick me up? As the minutes passed and the hour came and went, he began to feel quite bothered by the many inconvenient and inconsequential blocks that prevented him from studying with her. There was always something getting in the way. He had hoped for so much and was willing to put aside many essential tasks of his own just to come here to study. Suddenly aware of his scattered and self-important thinking, he recalled his intentions to be the best student, joyfully attentive, and happily doing anything that was asked of him. With that thought, a man driving a couple of yaks packed with supplies came into his view. Idly enjoying their progress towards him, he observed, well, apparently something else lives here. He was taken by surprise when they pulled to a full stop before him. Oh my God, really? Is this my ride? Stupid with exhaustion, he watched without offering to assist the old man as he lifted his heavy pack and tied it to the animal. How ironic, he thought. My gear gets to ride while I must walk. It didn't even occur to him to thank the yak owner for loading the heavy gear. So off they set down the road. The road soon turned into a rutted path, winding ever higher into the mountains. Day faded into night, and under the light of the full moon, with weary exhaustion, he plodded along to the sway of the pack animal before him. Shocked out of his stupor by walking into the backside of the yak, he realized that they had stopped. A couple of dim kerosene lights indicated that he might have reached his destination. The yak herder grunted something unintelligible as he untied the yogi's pack and lifted it to the ground. Still offering neither assistance nor gratitude to the man who had just helped him, the yogi picked up his pack and went seeking a place to lay his body down for the night. He recalled little else beyond the yak herder gesturing to a small, very dim light in the distance. Before he was awakened by a very bright ray of sunlight many hours later. In contrast to his sparse cell, with its stiff and uncomfortable bed, a rich golden hue of sunbeams overlaid the stone walls. Hoping he wasn't late, he washed, dressed in haste, grabbed his yoga mat, and hurried from his room. He was greeted by an astonishing sight of what looked to be a 16-year-old girl moving gracefully through her asana practice. He blinked and looked again, realizing that it was his teacher of almost 70 years. Quietly, he placed his mat close to hers and began his morning asana practice. By the time he'd completed his series, she was long gone. Sitting up after Shavasana, he took a good look at his surroundings. What a strange place to live, he thought. While the polished expanse of black rock where they had practiced was warmed by the sun, and it seemed comfortable and was protected from the winds, there was not much else of comfort in this environment. But it was the actual dwelling place of his teacher that amazed him the most. Someone had carved holes in the south-facing mountains and then outfitted those holes with windows and doors. He watched as his teacher emerged from one of the doors, carrying a steaming cup of liquid. "Welcome," she spoke. "I hope you're rested and ready to begin." She tied the past to the present with those few simple words and grounded them as teacher and student. "Now that you are warmed up, I would like to begin today's lesson," she said. "We will work with the downward flowing wind. So let's begin with Garudasana, shall we?" Wryly, he thought to himself, well, I guess that steaming cup of liquid is not for me. While observing his longing, she said, "I have a treat for our lesson today. Do you recall the great teacher who collected Lady Naguma's wisdom and passed it on to us?" "Yes," he said, "it was Master Taranatha." "Well, I have a story for you about one of his former lives. In that life, he was known as the great yogi Krishnacharya. Some say when Master Taranatha was young, knowledge of his previous life came to him in a dream. Others say that his master recognized him as both Krishnacharya and Kungadulchak. In his life as Krishnacharya, he was known by many names. Some are essential if you wish to learn more about him. A few of those names were Kanha, Kanapada, Krishna, Krishnapa, Krishnavajra, and finally Kalarupa. Now, while everyone agrees Krishnacharya was a great yogi, many will warn you, don't be like Krishnacharya. His story is written as a warning to students, she stated with an air of intrigue. Now, Garudasana is a pose that will connect us to Krishnacharya, the Apanavayu, and the wisdom that it transforms into. Do you recall the wisdom that comes when we work with this wind? She asked. Not really, he said. Well, it's the wisdom of equality. So if you listen closely to Krishnacharya's life story, with that in mind, perhaps you will learn something. As you listen, you may want to focus on the Muladhara and visualize a golden yellow light there. This color is associated with the Apanamaya. Now come to stand in mountain pose with your feet slightly apart and directly below your sitting bones. Connect with the earth and lift through the crown of your head, lengthening your spine. Find balance as you bend your knees and swing your left leg over the right. Now hook the top of your left foot behind your right. Oh, then she tapped him on his right knee, instructing him to keep that knee forward. Reach both of your arms out in front and snug your right elbow into the crook of your left. Twist your forearms around each other and bring your palms to face one another. Lift your elbows to shoulder height and stretch your fingers towards the sky. Now, relax into the pose and focus on your breath. Do you recall one of the inspiring messages from Master Taranatha's life? She asked. Well, I'm not sure, the yogi replied. I'm referring to the idea that we can be extraordinary. She ignored his mumbling words. I don't feel like that right now. Instead, she continued, Krishnacharya's life was extraordinary. But his life story that I'm going to tell you is a lesson in mistaking the ordinary for the extraordinary. I just told you that Kalavirupa was one of Krishnacharya's names. Now, at that time, it was customary to take your teacher's name. No doubt you recall the story of Virupa pinning the sun. Well, he was on his way to meet Krishnacharya at that time when he stopped the sun. So he took Krishnacharya with him when he traveled the length and breadth of India. Krishnacharya observed all of Virupa's astonishing feats and teachings. Now there came a time when Virupa's physical form was no longer visible to those without sufficient goodness. Before leaving Krishnacharya, Virupa instructed him to undertake 3 tasks. First, he needed to subdue an evil king. Second, he needed to take on a student whose name was Dhammarupa. And he needed to pass on the whispered lineage to the student. Finally, he was to locate and retrieve 5 diamond verses from Udayana. Present day, it's known as the Swat Valley. So his teacher shifted her focus to her student, instructing him to release Garudasana. The yogi thought, what is it about twisted poses? They get me all worked up. He was relieved to have a moment's freedom and grateful that she didn't immediately instruct him to switch to the opposite side. She continued her story. After he left Virupa, we know Krishnacharya undertook a 12-year retreat to the east, somewhere near Master Virupa's alma mater, named Somapuri, and it was built by King Dharmapala. At this time, we are told that Krishnacharya had about 3,000 students. Now, from this 12-year retreat, he had attained a few very small cities. He had a few earth-shaking visions. He achieved the capacity to leave an imprint on a rock. And when his concentration was very good, he could levitate a couple of feet. Apparently, Krishnacharya took a lot of pride in these minor achievements. So he was often being admonished, don't be distracted. Get down to your cushion, finish your practice, complete the task. So he did diligently continue to work on reaching his goal. However, one day, due to the power of his concentration, he started to float about 20 feet in the air. He was surrounded by all these umbrellas and the sounds of beating drums. And he became so proud of himself that he thought, this is good enough. And he decided, I'm going to leave retreat and I'm going to go and keep my commitment to Virupa. So he gathered together all of his 3,000 students and he started his journey to the south. So she interrupted her tale to tell the yogi, come into Garudasana with the right leg over the left and tuck the left foot behind the left calf. Tuck the right foot behind the left calf. Then she said, tell me, yogi, what do you suppose was the real goal of the 12 years retreat? The yogi responded, well, obviously it's the direct experience of ultimate reality. Then why do you suppose he left his retreat before he accomplished his goal? I'm not sure, the yogi replied. It doesn't really make sense. I guess Krishnacharya didn't have the goodness to get the job done, or something was blocking him. So you agree a teacher would disapprove of a student leaving retreat to complete some minor commitment? Yes, I agree, the yogi responded. Any idea what might cause Krishnacharya this difficulty? Maybe he felt the pressure of having so many students who are waiting for him to complete his task. Then again, perhaps he thought he had to live up to Virupa's reputation. They traveled together for so long, and he would have seen Virupa's remarkable capacity. So maybe it was about his pride, the student said. What's wrong with having pride, she asked. For one thing, the student responded, pride kills your capacity to learn. It's about the 3 problems of the pot, I think. When you have too much pride, it's like nothing can go into the pot. Sometimes you have pride in thinking you know better than others. So you won't listen to them, or you think you know everything already that there is to know. So you don't think to ask or explore deeper. Or in this case, I think Krishnacharya, he mistakenly took a lot of pride in these cities, which really are kind of neutral unless you're using them to help others. I think he thought they were a thing to be proud of rather than something that just comes from meditating. So maybe he had big delusions about who he was. Excellent, young master, she responded. Now, Krishnacharya had another famous teacher, and his name was Jalandhara. Yes, the renowned loch that Jalandhara was named after. It was named after this master. So the story goes that Krishnacharya took his 3,000 students to the south of India to stop this king from killing so many living beings. And at the shore of the sea that divided the island of Sri Lanka from the mainland of India, he left his students and began crossing the sea by walking on the water. He was so proud that he thought, even my teacher can't do this. With that thought, he began to slowly sink into the sea, and he was washed ashore. He found himself on shore looking up at his teacher, Jalandhara, floating in the sky above him. Jalandhara asked him, where are you going, Krishnacharya? And what seems to be the matter with you? Chagrined, Krishnacharya said meekly, well, I was going to Sri Lanka to save the people from an evil king. But then it occurred to me that my power was superior to yours. So as soon as I had that thought, I sank into the sea. Jalandhara said, you do no one any good thinking like this. Look, you must understand me and mine. You must understand that you are not going to help anyone unless you understand this. So I want you to go and find a student of mine He is a weaver. I want you to obey him completely, and he will help you attain the ultimate truth, which you have not understood yet. Promise me you will obey him. So Krishnacharya promised, and he got his minor cities completely restored. And with his confidence, he followed his teacher's instructions to go find the weaver. When he arrived at the weaver's city, he left his students to wait at the gates while he went in search of him. Walking down the main street where all the weavers had their shops, one by one he broke the threads of their looms with his gaze. Then, as each began to retie their threads manually, he knew that he had to keep searching. Finally, at the end of the street, the far side of town, he found a weaver whose threads spontaneously rewound them after he cut it with his gaze. So he knew he'd found Jalandhara's student, the one who could teach him to see ultimate truth. So Krishnacharya circled him 3 times. He bowed before him, respectfully asking him, "Please help me experience ultimate truth." "Well," inquired the weaver, "do you promise to obey me in all things?" "I do," Krishnacharya responded. "Well then, follow me," the weaver said as he sprang away from his loom and headed down the road away from the town. It was a short journey to their destination, a cemetery. Now, these places aren't like the pristine parks with lovely benches to sit upon that you find today. In those times, a cemetery was a ghastly place of butchery, blood and human bones and flesh strewn all about. It was a place where corpses were chopped up for birds and given to animals to eat. "So why do you think the weaver brought him to that place?" she asked. "I don't know, maybe to remind him that life is short and he didn't have the time to waste on these minor powers." "Not bad," she told him, "but not quite right. What do you think might happen here?" "I suppose Krishnacharya is about to be tested," he replied. "Yes, but how?" she asked. She waited for a moment and then said, "If he has pride, what kind of wisdom does he need?" "I think you said pride transforms into the wisdom of equanimity," the student said with uncertainty. "Excellent," she responded. "You can only get this wisdom when you let go of thinking of me before you, and I am better, and I deserve more, or I deserve the best." Going back to Jalandhara's request, what is Krishnacharya being forced to do? The yogi responded without hesitation. He's being forced to confront his pride by requesting teachings from a teacher of a lower status than he has. That's probably why he left his students on the outskirts of the town. "Sorry," the teacher said. "Can you explain that statement to me?" Well, her student said, "He's too proud to let them see who his new teacher is." "Ah, good. I didn't think of that," she said. Her student continued, "And now his classroom is a place of death. But I still can't imagine what the weaver will ask him to do." "Well, let me tell you then," she stated. "And by the way, you can release your pose and take a rest." So the weaver found a lovely fresh corpse and happily invited Krishnacharya to dine upon it. She watched the look of distaste fly across her student's face like clouds passing across the sky. She waited a moment and said, as Krishnacharya pulled out his knife and began to sever the flesh, the weaver indignantly stopped him, saying, "No, not like that." "What?" she commanded. And with those words, the weaver transformed himself into a wolf and began ravenously to feast upon the corpse. Shortly afterwards, he changed back into himself. Now, Yogi, what do you think the lesson is here? Well, you're supposed to use it to see emptiness, right? And I guess it has to do with the wisdom of equanimity, replied her student. Yes, she said. There are many things to examine in this lesson. First, the weaver might be telling Krishnacharya, you do not see yourself as equal to all living beings. A wolf considers this thing to be food. That's what makes it a wolf. You cannot let go of the idea of Krishnacharya and who Krishnacharya is. Then, taking a poke at Krishnacharya, at his pride, the weaver tells him, no, not like that. Prideful people don't like to be told they are doing something the wrong way. Her student added, I think it's kind of ironic that there might be a wrong or a right way to eat a human corpse, don't you? Krishnacharya and the weaver stay at the cemetery for their following teaching on emptiness. Again, the lesson involves food. The weaver produces a pile of feces. He divides it into 3 equal portions and offers Krishnacharya his share. Krishnacharya indignantly responds, are you kidding me? What would my students think? People would ridicule me if they saw me eating that. Again, Krishnacharya's pride blocks his capacity to understand the concept of emptiness. The teacher paused a moment to observe the disgust, disbelief, and horror flow across her own student's face. She stifled a smile as he mumbled, oh, I hope she never asks me to eat feces. Before continuing the story, she instructed him to come into Baddha Konasana, bound angle pose. Begin in staff pose, she said. Root down through your sits bones, bend your knees, and then allow them to fall open to the sides. Bring the soles of your feet together and now open them like a book. Next, press your shoulder blades against your back so you open your chest. The teacher waited a moment for him to settle into the pose, and then she requested him to lead with his heart, bending at the waist and folding over his feet. Her following words took him by surprise. She said, everything can be an offering. She said, a long time ago, when I was a child, I almost fell into a cesspool of human excrement. My mom caught me just in time, and she made me look at all the living beings who lived in and off of human waste. Then she taught me to overcome my revulsion of them. She told me that I could even make offerings of my own poo when I went to the bathroom. Yogi, what do you suppose the weaver might be telling Krishnacharya now? She waited for her student to respond, and she was pleasantly surprised by his words. You need to learn how to exchange yourself with others. That's good, she said. It's a step in the right direction. But don't forget why Krishnacharya's teacher, Jalandhara, sent him to the weaver. Okay, maybe it's about his worldview. He cannot escape the fact that he is forced to see that substance as excrement. But another being might see it as something better to eat. Excellent, she said, and here's the part that confirms your statement. So the story goes, while Krishnacharya is forced to see feces, he observes the weaver, a celestial being, and a naga partake of it as though it was the most delicious nectar. Now the yogi had to admit, this was the teacher's weirdest story yet. He was simultaneously repulsed and intrigued. Before his teacher could continue, he asked, "So, did Krishnacharya achieve the city, that supreme city that he wanted? And what happened to all of his students?" "Just wait," she said, "I'm coming to that." So the weaver took Krishnacharya back to town, where he produced a few pennies from his pockets and purchased a meager meal for them. Then turning to Krishnacharya, he said, "Why don't you bring your students here for a feast? Let's have a party." Krishnacharya looked at the food and he thought, "This is a joke." Still, he fulfilled his master's request, collected his 3,000 students, and brought them to party with the weaver. Now there was the most delicious display of food in the air when he returned, enough for all 3,000, and the plates renewed themselves again and again. The party went on for 7 days, and there was no end in sight. Finally, Krishnacharya became so disgusted with this scene that he ordered his students to pack up and leave. She watched her student cock his head as a gesture of wonder before he asked her, "Why? Do you mean why would he be disgusted with the party, or why did the weaver choose a party to help him understand emptiness?" "Both, I guess," he responded. And she said, "Well, I'm not sure either, but perhaps it has to do with the emptiness of the 4 kinds of giving. Because as Krishnacharya stalked off with his 3,000 students, the weaver shouted these words, 'Ah, you miserable children, you are destroying yourselves. You are the kind of yogis who separate the emptiness of perfect insight from the active compassion of life. What will you gain by running away? Canopies and drums are small achievements. Meditate and realize the nature of reality.'" I don't know, perhaps also Krishnacharya felt upstaged by the weaver's capacity to produce a never-ending feast. But mostly, I think it was to do with the fact that Krishnacharya couldn't see the emptiness of the feast and how it's possible to use that to help others. So, like the weaver shouted out, they really must learn to see emptiness in everything that ever comes to them. They must use the experience to attain this supreme city. So it's not just about meditating on the cushion. Now, by the way, which of the 4 kinds of giving was the weaver displaying in the party? Her student thought for a moment before answering. Well, first, the actual feast and all the time that it took would relate to the sharing of material things. Good, she said. Next would be the sharing of protection. Because he purchased those offerings, first of all, and then everything he gave just came from him. So nothing was taken in a wrong way from anybody else. And then the sharing of wisdom happened because the weaver was trying to use the feast to help Krishnacharya and his 3,000 students to understand emptiness. Good, she said. Then finally, it was the sharing of love because he opened his heart to the whole community and cared for each one. So I think all 4 forms of giving were present in the party. Her student continued to offer his insights. Feeling stingy directly poisons our ability to share, but it seems that pride works against it too, the yogi reflected. Excellent insights, his teacher responded. Sharing what you have is the source of jewels. And that's the power you get when you work to transform the apana vayu and the negative emotions of pride and stinginess that ride upon it. They say that the apana vayu reaches its pure form. When it reaches its pure form, we have perfected our ability to exchange ourselves with others. We devote every moment of our lives to working for the benefit of others with the same sense of urgency and effort that we do when we're thinking about working for ourselves. So we know that serving others is the only way to get both what they want and what we want. Our student suddenly blurted out, "Oh, now I know what you mean when you tell me to practice my asana for others and that it should open my heart if I'm doing it correctly. And if I don't feel that, I should check my motivation." Yes, she said, the wisdom of equality sees functionally, you are me and I am you. Because of that fact, we are now entirely willing to give away every form of happiness and take on every form of pain. When the emotions of pride, fear, and stinginess are blown out, they are entirely replaced with the wisdom of equality. "I have a question for you, Yogi," she said. "Is there a reason, do you think, that these lessons had to come to Krishnacharya before he could go and subdue the evil king?" "Well, maybe his pride would have caused him to do more harm than good," the yogi answered. "Like when pride is our main motivation for giving or sharing, we sometimes go too far and we regret the gift. In the case of the king, if Krishnacharya was taking pride in keeping his commitment to Varupa, then it wouldn't be giving protection so much as giving punishment, maybe." "Interesting," his teacher replied. "You can release your bound angle pose and come to sit in easy pose." Krishnacharya didn't seem to think that he needed to reach the supreme city to stop the killing, did he? Yet, if he understood where the violence was truly coming from by immersing himself in the supreme city, then maybe all he needed to do was stop the violence in his own heart. "Yogi, how do we know that Krishnacharya thought he was superior to the weaver?" she asked. "I think his arrogance," the student responded. "When he broke the threads of all those weavers, he was so arrogant, he didn't even bother to fix what he broke. And this was their livelihood. In a way, you could say he was stealing from them. He stole their time and maybe he devalued the quality of their work." She could feel her young student's desire to rally to their cause and wondered if he might make the connection between Krishnacharya's arrogance and his behavior towards the old man the evening before. And why did the weaver choose the lessons he chose for Krishnacharya? Like the corpse and the feces and the party, she asked. Well, I think Krishnacharya believed there was something in himself that made him better than others. And the weaver was trying to help him let go of this kind of pride so he could develop the wisdom of equality. His teacher agreed. A pure mind, free of pride, does not distinguish between pure and impure, good and bad, I and others. Rather, it experiences things equally. Now, the weaver is a wonderful example of someone who is a source of jewels. He was attempting to stimulate the growth of good qualities in Krishnacharya. When we stimulate good qualities in others by acts of giving and sharing, and by being magnanimous in a very regal manner, This is the wisdom of equality. This is what the weaver was doing. The point is to increase others' happiness and to stimulate their intelligence, their interest, their self-confidence, and energy. In terms of our speech, perhaps we would speak in a very compelling manner. And finally, our words would be very encouraging and our vocabulary very rich. It was actually Krishnacharya that spoke these words: zealously practice generosity and moral conduct, but you cannot attain siddhi supreme without a teacher. I have one more short story about Krishnacharya to tell you. After he left the weaver, he traveled for many days before reaching his next destination. And then on the outskirts of this particular city, he spotted a young girl sitting beneath a lychee tree. Now this lychee tree had fruit fully ripe and ready to eat. "Give me some fruit," he demanded of the girl. "I will not," she replied. So Krishnacharya used his mystic stare to make the fruit appear in his hand and drop off the tree. The girl sent the fruit right back to the tree. So Krishnacharya and the girl entered a staring contest. He would pluck the fruit from the tree with his powerful gaze, and the girl would send each piece of fruit back to the tree with an equally powerful look. Krishnacharya was once again brought down by his pride. He got angry and he cursed the young girl so that she felt writhing on the ground in pain, bleeding from her limbs. Now an indignant crowd gathered around, shouting at him, "I thought yogis were supposed to be kind and respect life, but you're a killer." Krishnacharya recollected himself when he heard these words. He felt ashamed of his actions, so he removed the curse on the girl. So this kind of shame, yogi, or consideration, it's one of the few bad feelings that are good for us to have. The yogi felt uncomfortable under her stern gaze. He wasn't sure what had changed at that moment until she instructed him. "Yogi, I want you to review your evening from the moment the bus dropped you at the crossroads. Check your thoughts for arrogance and pride, and check your behavior for stinginess. Leave all guilt aside. You don't need that," she warned. Knowing what you now know about the Apanavayu, is there anything you might have thought or done differently? You don't have to tell me. Instead, decide simply that you want to be a better you. Plant the seeds to make sure you are in the future. And this is the way you can become extraordinary, just like Master Taranatha. She paused for a few moments to allow him the space to think, and then smiling, she said, "When you think of Krishnacharya, think of the Apanavayu, the Muladhara chakra, visualize a golden yellow color, and think of equalizing wisdom. The key to your ultimate evolution is thinking of someone else as yourself and working as hard for their needs as you do for your own. Sharing what you have is the source of jewels. That's the power you get when you work to transform the Apanavayu and the negative emotions of pride and stinginess that ride upon it." Close your eyes and repeat after me. All wealth flows from me. I am perfect. I am perfect love. I create a world of equal happiness. Now, Yogi, let's go get you a nice hot cup of tea.